Russian President Vladimir Putin reaffirmed his support for his Venezuelan counterpart Nicolás Maduro amidst the United States military threat in the Caribbean Sea. And Venezuela denounced as an act of piracy the U.S. government attack on an oil tanker off the South American nation shores. And the Cuban government established a new mechanism for managing, controlling, and allocating foreign currencies in the country with measures aimed at stabilizing the island's macroeconomy. Hello, welcome from the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. Russian President Vladimir Putin reaffirmed his support for his Venezuelan counterpart Nicolás Maduro amidst the United States military threat in the Caribbean Sea. On Thursday, the Russian president held a telephone conversation with his Venezuelan counterpart expressing his solidarity with the South American nation and support for the Bolivarian government. In a statement, the Venezuelan Foreign Ministry indicated that both presidents exchanged opinions on the future development of friendly relations within the framework of bilateral strategic partnership and cooperation. President Vladimir Putin said that the Venezuelan people deserve respect in their legitimate struggle for sovereignty and independence in the face of U.S. interference. In a statement released by the Venezuelan government, according to that statement, both heads of state celebrate the results of the recent Intergovernmental High-Level Commission, in the framework of which 19 agreements were signed in all areas of joint work. They also highlighted ongoing preparations to move forward in the Joint Development Plan for 2030. President Maduro underscored the importance of consolidating advances in air and maritime connectivity, and both heads of states vowed to deepen direct flight initiatives as those in place between Venezuela and Moscow or St. Petersburg. For his part, President Putin ratified his full support to the Venezuelan president in his efforts to consolidate peace, political stability, and economic development. He also highlighted that Russia continues to support Venezuela in its struggle to defend its sovereignty, international law, and peace in the region, and puts its diplomatic capacity at service of strengthening cooperation in these areas. And Russian Foreign Affairs Minister Sergei Lavrov demanded an investigation into the United States seizure of an oil tanker off the coast of Venezuela in the Caribbean Sea and denounced this unilateral action.
Yesterday, the United States boarded an oil tanker off the coast of Venezuela, accusing it of transporting oil whose sale is prohibited. There is very little information, because I don't know how the U.S. views the situation in Venezuela, except for what President Trump has said publicly, demanding regime change or resignation. But Chevron operates in Venezuela and buys Venezuelan oil. And what illegal volume of this type of fuel, this type of hydrocarbon was on this tanker? This needs to be clarified in some way, and I really hope that the U.S., even if it considers itself entitled to take such action, out of respect of the other members of the international community, will explain on what basis it is taking these measures. Of course, we are in favor of discussing how to combat drug trafficking and how to ensure maritime security collectively, and not in a way that simply represents all members of the international community with a fait accompli of unilateral actions.
Precisely, the Venezuelan government denounced the U.S. government attack on an oil tanker on Wednesday as an act of piracy. Through an official statement, Venezuela strongly condemned the violent action, denouncing this new criminal act adds to the theft of Citgo, an important asset of the strategic patrimony of all Venezuelans, seized through fraudulent judicial mechanisms and outside the bounds of any legal norm. Moreover, Caracas highlighted how in these circumstances, the true reasons for the prolonged aggression against Venezuela have finally been revealed. It is not migration, it is not drug trafficking, it is not democracy, it is not human rights. It has always been about our natural wealth, our oil, our energy, the resources that belong exclusively to the Venezuelan people. Finally, the statement concludes, the Bolivarian government reaffirms that it will appeal to all existing international bodies to denounce this grave international crime and will defend with absolute determination its sovereignty, its natural resources, and its national dignity. Venezuela will not allow any foreign power to attempt to deprive the Venezuelan people of what belongs to them by historical and constitutional rights. And the Bolivarian Alliance for the Peoples of Our America also condemned the illegal seizure and confiscation of the Venezuelan oil tanker by the government of the United States. In a statement, ALBA denounced the act constitutes a grave violation of international law and a direct attack on the sovereignty of Venezuela. The Regional Alliance warned how this act added to the criminal seizure of Citgo reveals a strategy of plunder aimed at taking control of Venezuela's energy resources, setting an extremely dangerous precedent for international legal and maritime stability. In its closing remarks, the alliance demanded the immediate return of the vessel and the cessation of all actions to seize Venezuelan property. It also urged multilateral, regional, and global organizations to urgently speak out against this blatant violation of international law. Also in this context, Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel expressed the Caribbean nation's support for Venezuela amid the new aggression perpetrated by the U.S. government. In a statement shared on his social media, Díaz-Canel reaffirmed Cuba's full support for the statement issued by the Venezuelan government and strongly condemns the assault on an oil tanker in the Caribbean Sea perpetrated by the United States Armed Forces. The head of state stressed the action constitutes an act of piracy, a violation of international law, and an escalation of aggression against the sister nation. And the Venezuelan Foreign Affairs Minister Iván Gil thanked on Thursday the support of the Cuban head of state. Through a post on his socials, Gil expressed, on behalf of President Nicolás Maduro and the Venezuelan people, our sincere gratitude for your strong support and forceful condemnation of the recent assault perpetrated by the United States Armed Forces against an oil tanker in the Caribbean Sea. Moreover, the foreign minister stressed that this act of piracy not only constitutes a flagrant violation of international law, but also represents an unacceptable aggression against Venezuela's national sovereignty, right to free trade, and freedom of navigation. He closed by warning that the attack poses a threat to all the peoples of our region, jeopardizing the peace and stability that we value so highly. An Argentine Nobel Peace Prize winner, Adolfo Pérez Esquivel, highlighted the work of teleSUR in the context of the struggle against the imperial hegemony of the United States. Let's listen.
Today, it is an essential channel for learning about what is happening in the world because they want to impose a single way of thinking. Dominance is not only economic, but also cultural, based on that single way of thinking in order to dominate people. So, let's talk about how teleSUR has the rebellious conscience.
Y esa rebeldía y la conciencia la vemos día a día, ¿no? Porque
which we see every day because it broadcasts opinion without dogmatism. Try to find ways to liberate people. We are in a very cruel and hard fight, as are all those ships and weapons that Trump wants to impose on Venezuela, but also on Cuba for more than 60
Venezuela,
years.
Pero también a Cuba, más de 60.
And Nobel Peace Prize winner Adolfo Pérez Esquivel also questioned the awarding of the Nobel Peace Prize to an extremist who calls for a military invasion of our own country.
Mira, para mí el premio Nobel, una no esperaba premios.
For me, the Nobel Prize is nothing I expected. The other thing is that the Nobel Prize is a tool for the service of the people, and I dedicate it to the peoples of America. So my work is not personal. My work is shared by thousands of indigenous people, farmers, men and women.
Oh, we have now our first break coming up. Remember, you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you'll find news in different formats, news updates, and much more. We're going to be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. On Wednesday, the United States President Donald Trump threatened Colombian President Gustavo Petro amid his brutal attack against countries that have decided to defend the sovereignty and dignity of Latin America and the Caribbean. At a White House roundtable, Trump declared that he hoped that Petro was listening to him since he would be the next target of his alleged war on drugs. With these words, the White House tenant resumed his threats against the Colombian leader amidst the tensions generated by extrajudicial executions in the Caribbean and the Pacific, reinforced by the recent pirate attack on a Venezuelan oil tanker. In this scenario, President Petro responded to the threats by stating that the far-right leader is a very misinformed person.
Trump es un hombre muy desinformado de Colombia.
Trump is a man who is very misinformed about Colombia. It is a shame because he is dismissing the country that knows the most about cocaine trafficking. It seems that his interlocutors are completely deceiving him. There have been more than 1,000 combat operations on the ground, 1,446 combat operations on the ground against the mafias by our military forces and the government. We have carried out 13 bombing raids in an attempt to locate their leaders, using shared military intelligence in many of these battles.
Muchos de estos combates, ¿no?
In the United States, an emergency alert was issued on Wednesday for the state of Washington after an atmospheric river triggered severe flooding. State Governor Bob Ferguson assured that the scenario is the result of heavy rainfall that has left large accumulations of water. The situation remains critical in areas near rivers, especially in Skagit County, where more than 75,000 people are on alert for possible evacuation. In this context, the National Weather Service is forecasting up to 20 additional centimeters of rain, which will increase river flows. In this context, the governor requested immediate federal assistance and urged citizens to follow evacuation orders. And China sent a new batch of donations in solidarity with Cuba to support recovery efforts after Hurricane Melissa hit the east of the country. The information was confirmed by the Cuban ambassador to China, Alberto Blanco Silva, who said that the donation was sent by sea shipment with essential aid such as mattresses, roofing sheets, and solar lamps for affected families. The ambassador thanked China for this show of solidarity with Cuba after 65 years of diplomatic relations. For their part, Cuban authorities have confirmed that they have so far received aid to repair the damage caused by Hurricane Melissa from almost 30 countries on 5 continents. The Cuban government established a new mechanism for managing, controlling, and allocating foreign currencies in the country with measures aimed at stabilizing the island's macroeconomy. The new procedures published in the nation's official gazette on Thursday were issued by the Ministry of Economy and Planning and the country's central bank. The new legal norms introduced the possibility of other currencies becoming legal tender alongside the Cuban peso, which means that foreign currencies may be used for collection and payment transactions between economic agents based in Cuba. In this regard, the Ministry of Economy and Planning informed that the new system applies to both domestic and foreign legal entities, individuals engaged in economic activity, local development projects, and international cooperation. Let's learn more details on the new economic measures according to the Cuban Minister of Economy and Planning, Joaquin Alonso Vázquez. This decree law makes foreign currency transactions viable in the country, recalling that during the reorganization tasks, dollarization was eliminated from the economy and all transactions began to be conducted in Cuban pesos. In this context, the minister assured that the law is based on the experience of the last 10 years of economic activity, stressing that with its implementation, the nation is not building capitalism with the partial dollarization of the economy, but building socialism with the country's own characteristics. In this regard, the president of the Central Bank of Cuba, Juana Lilia Delgado, said that with these actions, a temporary deadline has been set since the country has not given up on the goal of restoring a monetary environment in which the Cuban pesos is the center of the monetary and financial system. Now, for our second break coming up, before we invite you to visit our Facebook page at teleSUR English, there you'll be able to watch our top stories, special live coverage, and much more. Follow our page and activate the notification button to stay up to date on the world's most recent events. A final break, don't go away. Welcome back. In Honduras, the Armed Forces Chief General Roosevelt Hernandez confirmed on Wednesday that the presidential transition is guaranteed as soon as the electoral body officializes the general elections results. Amid serious allegations of electoral fraud by the country's political and social organizations, the senior official reiterated that the armed forces will guarantee democratic order as they have done throughout President Xiomara Castro's term. The officer also recognized the good relations with his military counterparts in the United States and said that he had no doubts about President Donald Trump's interference in the electoral process on November 30th. And on Wednesday, the government of Peru confirmed that U.S. military engineers are supporting the relocation of the Peruvian Navy's naval base located in the port of Callao in a project valued at $3 billion. Peru's Foreign Minister Hugo de Sela stated it is a relocation to expand port capacity. However, experts warned that the project could involve the construction of a new U.S. military base on Peruvian territory. At a press conference with foreign correspondents, the minister also referred to his recent visit to the United States, where he met with Secretary of State Marco Rubio to discuss issues of political cooperation, investments in strategic sectors, and regional tensions related to U.S. operations in the Caribbean. The Palestinian Ministry of Foreign Affairs urged the international community to immediately implement United Nations resolutions calling for an end to the Israeli occupation and to move forward with the effective recognition of an independent and sovereign Palestinian state. In a statement, the Foreign Ministry warned that the prolonged occupation continues to systematically violate the fundamental rights of the population in the West Bank and Gaza through policies of displacement, repression, and territorial usurpation. The ministry also emphasized that ending these violations and guaranteeing the right to self-determination are indispensable conditions for regional stability and therefore urged states and the United Nations to take concrete measures and strengthen international protection of the Palestinian people. And thousands of families in Gaza are facing worsening conditions as Storm Byron batters the region with flash floods, strong winds, and hail. Humanitarian workers report that makeshift tent camps have been inundated, leaving residents exposed to the elements. According to the United Nations Office for Palestine, nearly 850,000 people across 761 displacement sites are at severe risk of flooding, with storm water mixing with sewage and solid waste, contaminating refugee areas and forcing families to move in search of dry ground. Aid organizations warn that Israeli restrictions imposed on the entry of tents, tools, and equipment needed to repair water and sanitation systems have compounded the crisis. Relief workers say the inability to bring in essential supplies has left communities vulnerable to both the storm's immediate impact and longer-term health risks.
The storm has had a severe impact on the population. Buildings have collapsed and much of the infrastructure has been destroyed, leaving the area unable to drain the large volume of water. We have also recorded one fatality due to the extreme cold. We clearly warn the world that the situation in the Gaza Strip and what is expected to unfold in the coming hours will be difficult.
Last night was a terrible night for us and our children because of the heavy rain and cold. The children got all wet, the blankets got wet, the mattresses got wet, and we did not know where to go. The situation is dire. Look at the weather. We are flooded and have no clothes for ourselves or our children. All our bedding and clothes are soaked, and we don't know what to do. We can even go outside to light a fire to cook because we have no gas or firewood.
Ladies, we have come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net, and you can also join us on our social media. For teleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thanks for watching.